The Oppo Find X6 Pro features one of the best camera kits on the mobile market and enjoys a limited section of phones that offer 1-inch sensor for the primary camera. Indeed, the Find X6 Pro has a 50-megapixel primary camera with a 1 Sony sensor, followed by a 50-megapixel ultra-wide camera with autofocus and a 50-megapixel zoom camera with a stabilized periscope lens for 2.8x optical zoom. There is a fourth camera at the front for selfie purposes. A 32-megapixel imager with support for autofocus. Oppo has brought Pro Mode support to all of its cameras. It gives you control over the usual stuff like ISO, exposure, white balance, manual focus, and shutter speed up to 30s. There are also focus peaking and histogram to help you out. RAW plus expanded dynamic range are available across all 3 rear cameras. All this photo was took by the main camera 12.5 megapixel. The main camera on the Oppo Find X6 Pro saves 12.5 megapixel by default, and those are among the best you can get from a smartphone these days. The amount of resolved detail is great, while the processing is mature, and the rendition turned out nicely balanced and natural looking. All photos are nose-free, sharp and just right, and the colors are lively but not over the top. The contrast is high, and the dynamic range is adequate but not too high. Some of the flat surfaces look so squeaky clean that they are almost waxy in appearance. It's only visible from up close, but it's definitely an observation that stands out compared to the other camera phones. With 1-inch sensors, Oppo says its primary camera is capable of 2x in sensor zoom, and we can confirm it's quite good. It is probably done by cropping the center of the 50MP oppo, as it's not exactly like a 2x optical. 1. You can clearly see where the upscaling algorithm didn't do a great job with fine detail, such as trees, grass, and roof tiles. The 50-megapixel photos taken with the main camera look upscaled from 12.5 megapixel, and we can't recommend using this mode. The ultra-wide camera also relies on a large 50-megapixel sensor, even if its bin pixels are just 2.0 micrometers big. The camera supports autofocus and uses a freeform lens, instead of the traditional spherical or aspherical optical elements. The camera uses an asymmetrical lens with a complex and uneven surface. The freeform type of lens tackles optical aberrations and allows better quality light to reach the sensor. 2 major benefits for an ultra-wide-angle camera. The 12.5 megapixel photos taken on the ultra-wide camera are easily among the best in class. They are incredibly detailed, clean of nose, and have minimal distortion around the corners. Even intricate detail, such as foliage or dog fur, come through very well and look natural. The white balance is accurate, and the colors are great, matching the colors of the photos from the main camera. The contrast is high once again, and the dynamic range is great but not too extreme. Overall, this ultra-wide camera captures amazing photos, just like the main camera. The ultra-wide camera also supports 50-megapixel high-res shooting, and once again, the photos are simple upscales from the default 12.5 megapixel output. The ultra-wide camera also doubles as a macro shooter. Note that there is an option for auto macro, but when triggered, it crops and upscales from the photo to match the field of view of the main camera 23mm. That's why we didn't use the auto macro, and instead shot our close-up photos in their default 15mm FOV, and the ultra-wide close-ups are outstanding. The center of the image is amazingly detailed and sharp, without traces of nose, and with superb color rendition. The background is equally impressive with lovable bokeh, good dynamic range, and a nice overall rendition. Indeed, these have to be one of the best close-up shots in terms of image quality you can get from a smartphone today. Let's look at some zoomed photos now. Portrait mode offers 3x and 1x zoom levels, with the 3x being the default option. The portraits we took with the zoom camera are impeccable, with excellent subject rendition, resolve detail and processing, impressive colors, great dynamic range and no visible nose. The background is also lovely. The bokeh has been a bit enhanced, but doesn't look artificial. On the contrary, quite natural and convincing. The 1x portraits are also worthy of praise. The subject is well developed with a ton of detail, while its separation from the background is as proficient as it can be these days. The simulated bokeh is quite likable. Finally, let's talk about the selfie camera. It's a 32MP quad Bayer shooter, one that is capable of autofocus, a rarity these days. It saves 32MP images instead of 8MP, which means you should not expect a whole lot of detail. Finally, let's talk about the selfie camera. It's a 32-megapixel quad Bayer shooter, one that is capable of autofocus, a rarity these days. It saves 32-megapixel images instead of 8-megapixel, which means you should not expect a whole lot of detail. And indeed, the 32-megapixel selfies are solid and, in fact, surprisingly good. The ones taken without HD are the first two shots are incredibly detailed. With a nicely balanced rendition and natural processing, the colors are accurate, the nose is low, and the dynamic range is a bit narrow. The photo mode appears to support auto night mode, and saves the same photos as the dedicated night mode, which also operates at an automatic level. The night photos from the main camera are some of the best you can get from a smartphone in 2023. The resolve detail is top-notch. The exposure is outstanding. The dynamic range is more than enough. There is no visible nose. And the color saturation is awesome. The 3x zoomed photos from the telephoto camera are impressive too. All shots we took at night turned out detailed, then sharp with low nose, great colors, and high dynamic range. They are quite bright too. In fact, looking across the photos from all three cameras, we can clearly see they have consistently good exposure, color rendition, and dynamic range. Something that's extremely rare. The 6x zoomed photos are digitally zoomed, crop, and upscaled from the 3x ones, and the detail is not rendered as nicely. Tripod night mode is available as part of the night mode. You need to enable it yourself. It works on all three rear cameras, and the photos it took are impeccable. This mode needs about 2 to 3 south on the main camera and about 8 south on the UW and 3x shooters. Here are photos of our usual posters, taken with the Oppo Find X6 Pro. You can see how it stacks up against the competition. Thank you for watching my video.